Ever scroll through Twitter and just think, man, this feels like a whole different world? Like it's easy to forget that just a century ago, the world really was totally different, driven by these powerful ideologies clashing, reshaping the map.
And what's wild is how those ideas, they still echo today, often in ways we don't even realize. It's like trying to understand a play without reading the script. You might see the action, but you totally miss what's motivating it.
Exactly. So, to walk us through this historical drama, we have our expert ready to break down the script, ready to set the stage.
Absolutely. Let's raise the curtain on the early 1900s, all right?
Yeah.
Picture Europe. It's this crowded room full of empires, each one flexing, right? Trying to outdo each other for resources, land, global influence, you name it. Tensions were high, let me tell you.
Like a powder keg just waiting for a spark.
Exactly. And sadly, that spark came not once, but twice. Two world wars. That's why we call the 20th century the century of war. Grim, but true.
Millions dead, empires crumbled. It's hard to even grasp the sheer scale of it all. But here's what gets me. Behind the battles, the treaties, it all goes back to ideas, ideologies shaping history.
And that's what makes this more than a dry history lesson, right? These weren't just wars over land, they were clashes of entire worldviews. We're talking imperialism, capitalism, socialism, communism, massive ideas that still resonate.
Right, like the usual suspects in a textbook. But alongside those familiar faces, there were two other ideologies gaining serious traction: nationalism and militarism. And this is where things get really interesting. Because we always hear about national pride, but how did that become a driving force in global conflict?
Think of it this way. Nationalism is like fire, right?
Hmm.
In the right context, controlled, contained, it can provide warmth, community. But you let it burn unchecked. Convince people their nation is superior, destined to rule. That's when it gets dangerous.
So it's not just about loving your country, it's about believing yours is better than all the others.
Exactly. And then toss militarism into the mix, this belief that military might is the answer to every international disagreement. And, well, you've got a recipe for disaster.
Historians even have an acronym for it: main militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism. Like, these factors created the perfect storm for World War I to just explode.
And explode it did. But here's the kicker. The treaty that was supposed to end it all, the Treaty of Versailles, it actually made things worse.
Wait, really? How so?
Imagine this. You get blamed for a massive disaster, right? Handed a bill you can't possibly pay, and your pride is totally stomped on. That was Germany after World War I. The treaty, especially that war guilt clause, it humiliated them, planted the seeds for more conflict down the line.
So instead of preventing another war, they were practically guaranteeing it.
In a way, yeah. And as if that wasn't enough, this huge shift was happening elsewhere, the Russian Revolution. Out of the ashes of World War I, you've got this new power rising, the Soviet Union, fueled by communism.
So you've got the aftershocks of a devastating war, global power shifting, and this new ideology on the rise. The world must felt like it was spinning off its axis.
It's hard to even imagine, you know?
Yeah.
The uncertainty of it all. The old world just shattered, and people are desperate, desperate for answers, someone to blame, and most importantly, a way forward.
Totally. It's like the perfect breeding ground for extreme ideologies, right? When people feel lost, disillusioned, they'll cling to anything that promises a simple solution, even if it's dangerous.
Exactly. And that's what we see in the 1920s, the 30s,
Yeah.
this rise of extremism. We always hear about the political spectrum like it's a left-right line. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's more helpful to think of it as a circle, actually.
A circle. Okay, now I'm really intrigued. Tell me more.
So picture this circle. One side, you've got your extreme left ideologies, right? Opposite side, extreme right. But here's the thing. As you go further out towards those extremes, both sides start to look awfully similar, especially in how they control things, suppress individual freedom, all.
Yeah. So it's less about left versus right, more about the dangers of extremism, period, no matter what flavor.
Exactly. And at the very bottom of that circle, where those extremes kind of converge, that's where you find totalitarianism.
Totalitarianism. Chills, man, chills. We're talking regimes where the government controls everything: the press, the economy, people's lives.
Everything. Individual freedom.
Yeah.
Gone. Subsumed by the state. Want a chilling glimpse into that world? Read Orwell's 1984.
It's crazy how a book written back then, 1949, still feels so relevant today. Like, did Orwell have a time machine or something?
The guy was prescient, no doubt. And what's even more interesting, Orwell himself was a socialist. But he saw the danger in totalitarianism, regardless of where it came from on the political spectrum. He understood that any ideology, even one that starts with good intentions, can be twisted, used for bad purposes.
And he gave us the language for it, right? Big brother, doublespeak, thought crime. These terms are so ingrained in our culture now. We use them every day talking about current events, and half the time we don't even realize where they came from.
It's true. And those warnings about surveillance, censorship, manipulating language, they might be even more relevant now in the digital age than they were back then. Think about it. The constant monitoring, the misinformation, the attempts to control what we see, what we think.
Man, that's kind of terrifying when you actually stop and think about it, like we're living in a digital panopticon or something.
And that's exactly why we study history, right? To understand how these ideologies take root, the devastating consequences they can have, we have to recognize the warning signs, be critical thinkers, see through the propaganda, and challenge those in power when we need to. But it's not enough to just see these patterns in the past.
We need to see them playing out right now, in the present.
Exactly. And that's where our deep dive goes next. We've been, exploring the whole battlefield of ideas, but now it's time to meet the guys who took those ideas, made them into terrifying realities.
You're talking about Hitler, Stalin. Two names that still send shivers down your spine no matter what.
No doubt, two very different guys, but both masters at using ideology to grab power, reshaped their entire nations, often in brutal, oppressive ways. It's chilling.
That's what's so fascinating, right? How they took ideas that were supposed to be about lifting people up and twisted them, turned them into tools of terror. It's compelling and terrifying at the same time.
It's like watching a train wreck in slow motion.
Yeah.
You see it coming, the warning signs, you know it's going to be awful, but you can't look away.
And that's exactly what we're going to unpack in our next episode, a deep dive into the rise of Hitler, the rise of Stalin, their regimes, the devastating consequences they had for millions.
Absolutely. We'll dig into those ideologies, Nazism, Stalinism, and how they managed to seduce whole nations. It led to some of the darkest moments in human history.
And by understanding these extreme cases, it helps us recognize those patterns, even today, right? We can better equip ourselves to challenge that stuff if it wops up again.
Exactly. Think of it this way. Studying history isn't about memorizing names and dates. It's about arming yourself with knowledge. Knowledge to make sure those horrors never happen again. Powerful stuff.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive, the thought I want to leave you with is, what lessons can we take from the 20th century? How can WE be on guard, be vigilant against extremism, against manipulation here in the 21st century? Big questions, right? But keep those questions with you as you move through the world. Because history, it's not just in the past, it's happening right now. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning.